Hi, this is Karen at the Meaning Code, where we explore the structures of reality to find the metaphors that uncover the hidden reality. The truth is out there, just waiting for you. And today I'm going to be talking again with Karl, who is extremely knowledgeable about almost everything. And he and I kind of see things from two sides of the same page, I think. He's on one side, I'm on the other, but there's only a sheet of paper between us. So we're going to try to figure out a way to make our ideas make sense together. Thanks for joining. If you like the material, please click the like button and subscribe so that we can get some more viewers. See you soon. Hi, everybody. I'm here today with Karl, and I want to start out, Karl, by telling you that I deeply appreciate everything that you've been able to share on my channel and everything I've been able to watch you share on other channels. And it's been a revelation for me to learn a lot of the things that you have already incorporated through your life of study and things that I have not had the opportunity or maybe the bandwidth to study in my life. And so you've deeply enriched my life, and I really appreciate it. And
thank you.
And we've been talking about a problem online for quite some time. Well, the whole thing that we've been discussing is a fundamental problem of why have we gotten to the place that we've gotten in the world today, and what is the source of that problem, and is there a solution to that problem? Because if there isn't a solution, the whole world is going to spin into meaninglessness. So I think that the two of us kind of have the view that is almost like you're looking at one, your view is on one side of the piece of paper, my view is on the other side of the piece of paper. And I think if we took that piece of paper and put it up to the light and looked through it, we would see something that is more whole and more true than either one of our perspectives alone. And I'm not talking about compromise, because I believe there is such a thing as truth. But if some people say, well, the truth is one end of the spectrum and lies are at the other end of the spectrum, if you compromise, you have now stepped off of the truth. And we must not do that. We have to have a pristine relationship with the truth. So it's not a matter of compromise, but it's a matter of seeing where the truth actually lies. And I think there's something very big in this discussion that we've been having that might help us find that truth. So what do you think? Shall we give it a try?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with everything you just said. So,
okay.
No problem.
Okay.
So I very much agree with your, well, in that sense of compromise, that it has to be somewhere in the middle. Well, then it's nothing. It's not the truth. You can't compromise the truth. I think I've made it very clear in my comments on many, many videos. Yours and by the way, let me take the opportunity, reciprocally to thank you for the stuff that you're doing on your channel. I think it's a very good channel. I think a lot more people should be watching it. I think, like I was watching some of your recent guests. I think it was Neil and Dale, was it, recently? Dave. And of course, our I'm very familiar with, because we've had discussions together. So it was on the one video where I said, well, I can't think of anything I can't comment on because I agree with everything. Like, that's rare. But
well,
anyway,
I would like to point not only you to, but other viewers to a video that I did last week with Matt. The name of the video, I think, is Sonic Painting.
And right, I saw the sketch on that, but I haven't watched that. I have not had time to watch that one yet because, I mean, Paul Van der Clay puts out a huge amount of stuff, and so I watch his stuff, but I try to watch yours next. Next to him, you're the next channel that I watch the most, I guess. But I do admit that I've missed a couple.
Well,
I'll catch up.
I've missed a lot because once I start watching videos, then I don't have the time or the bandwidth to focus on reading, and there's a lot of reading I need to catch up on because. Now that I've met you, I see that there's a lot more in the world to know than what I know. So
yeah, I'm reading Dominion right now. So, based on Paul Van der Clay's Dominion.
Oh, Dominion.
Tom
Holland.
The Tom Holland book.
Yeah. Yeah. So So I've been thinking about this two sides of the piece of paper thing, and actually jotted down some notes today. But let's just take a look at the issue with Ian McGilchrist's book, The Master and His Emissary. As I started reading it, I saw certain things in there that I like his perspective on, and I thought there was a lot of truth in it. But in the conversations that you and I have been having about the book, I realized that I had not, because I hadn't gotten to the end of the book yet, I didn't know that his thesis was that this is an inevitable consequence of evolution, and that our brain has actually been evolving to be more left brain, and that the left brain is taking over the right brain. I didn't realize that his thesis was that it was a physical change in our brains. And I think that's a fundamental misunderstanding of what's going on completely. Not because I disagree with the idea of evolution, but because I think that is that's hopeless.
Well, I mean, it depends how he means. No, I have not read the full book. I did read the essay that you were kind enough to send the link to. Well, and I paid my 99 cents to Amazon, and I did read the essay, which sort of summarizes, I guess, what's the main findings of the book are without getting into the details. It summarizes
one little piece of his thesis.
Yeah, okay, all right, okay. So, all right, so that's the only background I have on that. But I've also read, of course, I went to various other sources, like reviews of his book, and comments. Most of them were positive, but there were some negative. I always go to negative reviews first, because that tells you a lot more about the book than the positive, because of confirmation bias. People will tend to write positive reviews, and then, but of course, it doesn't mean that I'll take it for granted that the negative reviews are correct. So, but I do try to look at those to see where some of the issues might be that people are concerned of. And basically, I think his thesis that the left brain is, but it depends. If you say taking over, I would be like you. I think I disagree with that. Now, but from an evolutionary perspective, without getting into the left brain, right brain issue, just the fact that reason developed as to me, a corrective to some of the issues we have with our central nervous system, and particularly with the basic emotions that we have. That's a valid point. I think that, evolution typically does not do things just because, it doesn't waste. Can you put on pause a second? My little daughter just came in, but yeah, sorry about that. Even with my precautions of locking myself, my daughter figured out a way to get in. So anyway.
Yes, but you spoke to her with such love, and you acknowledged her beautiful.
Yeah, today they get early release from school. They get up early on Wednesdays.
I see.
But anyway, so where were we? Oh yeah, McGilchrist. So I do think there is a reason why such function like the higher brain functions in the neocortex and things like that come later than the what people would say the reptile brain, or the more primitive brain that perhaps account for some reflex actions, and then later on maybe the right brain is more tends to more emotional types of reactions, perhaps. I don't want to put too much into this left brain versus right brain thing. The fundamental issue is whether reason, what is the relationship between reason and, let's say, in general, let's call it emotions, or a more holistic view of approaching the world, where reason, correctly, as you mentioned in some of our correspondence, tends to be the thing that breaks down a system into its parts for further analysis, right? And the fact is, just as you've said, in our emails, we need both both, to survive. The classic in the literature, this is addressed in many areas by many different authors. But I'm wearing this Star Trek shirt today for a reason, because in the popular culture, I guess maybe one of the iconic representation of this is in the original series with Mr. Spock being the completely left brain, completely focused on reason and logic, versus Dr. McCoy, who is much more emotional and reacts very emotionally to a lot of situations. And then in between, you've got Captain Kirk, who is sort of on both. So he's got the right balance between the two. And obviously, we're meant to think that Captain Kirk is the one that's that's in the right place. He's not at one extreme or the other. He's able to balance the two in the right way and make the right decisions because of this. So
let me just clarify. So you're making the binary between reason and emotion.
Yes, more or less. I mean, that's a gross oversimplification. But what reason?
You were going to unsimplify it a little bit and tease that out.
Yeah, I'm going to say something.
Then on the reason side, then you're saying that there's more than just reason over there, because obviously on the emotion side, there's way more than just emotion over there. So, or are you saying that it's reason versus this everything else?
No, it's not reason versus everything else, but it's what reason allows us to do is to, first of all, analyze the world. But basically, the main benefit of reason is that it allows us to predict the future. It sounds weird to say that, but it's very true. So reason, because we're able to analyze the world and then reconstruct it into theories about how the world works, automatically our brain comes up with theories of what are patterns in the universe. And sometimes it's wrong about that. We tend to see patterns even when there are not really patterns there. So we can be fooled by that. So we have to be very careful. But if we push the analysis far enough, hopefully the patterns that we look at turned out to be real. And the way we know is we speculate that patterns are real. And when I say real, basically from an evolutionary point of view, that means they are useful for survival, right? So, which to me means also corresponding to reality, to the real world. And of course, a lot of people debate that, but to me, that's the way I see it. I think the more our model, the world that we build in our brain corresponds to the real world, the better we're at. Even though we'll never attain, of course, perfection. It's impossible. Mm-hmm. John Vervaeke says a lot of really pertinent things about that. So one of the things that reason does is to allow us to see farther in the future than our emotions do. Emotions and reflexes and instant reactions are awesome for dealing with immediate sensory input to the nervous system. So in situations where we have to react very fast and we don't have a lot of time to think about it, then we have to rely on those. We have no choice. Reason, and that's why Daniel Kahneman's book is titled Thinking Fast and Slow. It's because, essentially he says, well, reasoning is great and it has its purpose, but it tends to take a lot of mental energy and it's very slow compared to our immediate ability to react to sensory inputs through our emotions, our fast thinking. On the other hand, the fast thinking is very driven to the immediate, right? It's not a long range thing. If there's a lion suddenly enters the room, it's the fight or flight, type of reaction that we're going to have, and we don't have time to think a lot and analyze, and we're going to have to basically rely on our reflex actions, on our emotional reaction to what's happening, and either we think we can outrun the lion or hide, or, we don't have a lot of time to analyze, because if we take too much time, we're probably going to be the victim of the lion. On the other hand, in situations where we have a little bit more time to think about things and we can analyze the situation, it allows us to gradually come up with modes of action, or ways of thinking about the world that will benefit us more in the long term. And the long term, that's very ill-defined. So it could be the medium, anything but the very short term. And that's the basis of morality, actually. All right. Morality is what tells us that when we should sacrifice the short term in order to have a better long-term outcome. I mean, that's one way to look at it. I think it's a very good way to look at it. If all we needed was our immediate emotions, and all we needed to do was react to the world in a very short-term fashion, as most animals do, then we don't need morality. To talk about morality in conjunction with animals, except the human animal, makes no sense. But one of the things that our ability to reason and the derived ability to come up with a moral code, the two go hand in hand. And if you read, Augustine or Aquinas, that's what they talk about. And maybe we can even go farther back than that, but if you want to keep it to say in the Christian tradition, because you can go back to Plato, and a lot of that stuff is being discussed already at that point. This trade-off, this constant trade-off between, okay, what is good in the short term versus what is good in the long term, is what forms at least one of the pillars of our morality. Okay, you could argue that there are others, but that's one of them for sure. And the other one I would say perhaps is just the ability for people to live in peace with each other, in an order of human beings that what we could call a convivial order, from the Latin, live together without constant conflict, right? So these are the basis for morality. The objective, I must say this, I must stress this, the objective basis for morality. And you could always say, that's the human condition, right? So the humans, unlike most animals, are able to weigh, potentially anyway, the trade-offs between short-term and long-term as far as how to live their lives. Obviously we all know some people like to live just for the now, and who cares about tomorrow, I've seen this as a meme on Facebook sometimes, live your life as if this was your last day on earth. I mean, it's just completely idiotic. I mean, it's like nobody lives their life. Well, thankfully, or perhaps I shouldn't say nobody, but almost nobody lives their lives that way.
Well, there's two sides. I think there's two sides. Well, there's many facets.
Yeah,
just take that one sentence. To live your life as if it's your last day on earth. That could also mean to allow your life to be invested with as much meaning as you would want in your life if this were your last day on earth. Not necessarily that you get as much gusto or that perspective, but and I want to afford a slightly different diagram than the one you've been drawing, rather than a diagram between reason and emotion or slow and fast. I'd like to think more in terms of, I think the fundamental problem is more a fundamental problem between utopia building and reality.
Well, that is a problem, but I don't think it's the same kind of problem.
No,
they probably they're related, but
you could say maybe one of them is this way, the other one is this
right.
way.
I don't think they are distinct. I mean, we can discuss both.
You and I have something to put together here, right? Because there's very little of what you're saying that I'm not agreeing with. I do think I see the source of reason as being something different than you see the source of reason as being. But I want to explore this idea of utopia versus reality a little bit, because as I said in an earlier comment, I think the problem goes back to the garden, because that's where that problem began. This idea that it's humanly possible for us to construct our own utopia, that we can find our own alternate version of the truth, and we can construct our own utopia based on our version of the truth, so that it all comes from us, and we can take pride in our constructions. And
yeah, well, that's the ultimate conceit, and that's a extremely dangerous idea.
Extremely dangerous idea. And I think it's the difference between that and truth, because I see reality and truth as being the same, two different facets of the same thing,
sure.
right?
Well, truth, it really pertains to statements, propositions, right? Truth, only propositions are true. That's why I was shocked by Jordan Peterson.
This is our big disagreement right there, that truth is propositional statements. There's my problem right there.
No, truth only applies to propositions. Things can't be true. Acts can't be true. Arguments are not even true. They're either valid or invalid, but they are not true or not true. There are four functions of language. There's the expressive, signaling, the descriptive, and the argumentative, and truth and falsehood only apply to the third one, which is descriptive. So the description either fits the reality or it does not. That's what true or false means. Everything else, people use the word true or false in different contexts. I was kind of disappointed to see Jordan Peterson, for example, use it in a very different, he calls it a sort of a Darwinian truth. I think that's a very confusing and bad way of doing things. I think you should use the words the way as close as possible to the way they're used in normal language every day. So to say, for example, I think you give the example of the atomic bomb being true. It's like that makes no sense to me. That is a ridiculous statement. It's either, you could say it's useful, you could say it's dangerous, you can say it's a bunch of other stuff, but true or not true is definitely not an attribute that I would put to any object. Now, a statement about the object can be true or not true. Yes, of course. That's and the same thing when we argue. When we make an argument, we don't say the argument is true or false. We say it's valid or invalid. That's a different concept. It's not the same.
Well, so I want to.
So I have to be. That's the way.
I want to explore this idea a little bit more about truth. So if you'll just give me a moment to flesh this out.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's a category error that's going on in the world today, and I think the category error is, and I'm making a pretty big statement here. I think the category error is that we have begun to theorize about theories. We have begun to see in some sense, in many cases, we see theory as fact. And the theories that we've constructed that we now see as fact become systems. And those systems are totalizing systems. And I think every religion on the face of the planet, Christianity as a system included, is becoming a totalizing system. Because when you worship the system, you are worshiping error, because systems have built into them human action and human behavior. So you can't let a system become your reality. If you try to live within a system, you're automatically in a place that's going to destroy your flourishing as an individual, destroy your capacity to add meaning and beauty and purpose to the world and to other people. and that rather than worshiping a system, we need to be worshiping truth. Now, I heard you say that the other day in one of your comments, and I said
That's why I say that all the time.
Yes, okay. Now, the difference that you and I have is that I see that Jesus Christ is the embodiment of truth. He says, I am the truth, the way and the life. So the truth resides in him. So that when we are united with him, we begin like an eternal marriage. And in marriage, the only way you can come to know the other person is to spend time with them, listen to them, try to understand deeply what they're saying. And that becomes this relational knowing. And out of that, we are transformed, just as we are transformed in marriage. If we really enter into a marriage to know the other person deeply and to let them know us deeply, we are transformed and we become new and more. Mm-hmm. And that's where I see the fundamental problem, is that people have begun to construct systems. Denominations are, this is my pride that says my way is better than your way, and over here you have your denomination where you're saying your way is better than my way. And we make propositional statements and we say my truth is truer than your truth. But that's not what it's about at all. It's about reality and all of our utopian constructions. And it's the one against all of this falsehood.
Yes, so that's the way okay, but then are you saying that Jesus is your truth and it's a better truth than other people's truth? Or, I mean, I say my view is cut the middleman and just go for the truth, you know. And we don't know. We will never know the absolute, you know, the 100% of the truth. All we can do is kind of search and do the best we can. And, you know, we can talk about how we do this in the real world, you know, how we as the human Homo sapiens have tried to accomplish this, you know, to get closer and closer to the truth without ever any hope of fully attaining it.
Well, you read Maps of Meaning, right?
Yes, I have.
Yeah,
it took me a long time, but
yeah, you told me one time that you thought that what Jordan Peterson had accomplished in Maps of Meaning was nothing short of extraordinary.
Yes, I mean, you know, other than his definition of truth, which I found a little bizarre, although, I mean, okay, I understand
I never heard him give that definition of truth, and I agree with you. If he said that, bizarre.
No, you've never seen his infamous or famous, I don't know, you pick your term, discussion about that with Sam Harris?
No, I didn't watch the
that is so, it's so notorious, or whatever, I don't know, again.
Was that the first one?
Yeah, the very first one. They were supposed to talk about other subjects, and that they ended up early in the conversation being fixated on truth. And then for the next 2 hours, that's all it was about, is their disagreement about the definition of truth. Now, I'm not, as you well know, I'm not a big Sam Harris fan. I think he's wrong about just about everything. But on that one, I had to kind of take his side. I thought, you know, that's more my definition of what truth is.
Well, I heard it was a train wreck.
And yeah, it was.
I don't like to watch
because they could never. Well, and this is very often with Sam Harris. Although in this case, I was on his side. So, but you know, he's not very receptive in general to new ideas. He's a very emotional type of person. Most people see him as like this ultra rational, you know, human being. He has a very calm demeanor, he's very tend to speak in a quiet voice and never raise his voice, or, you know, if he does, it's barely. So, you know, he doesn't get emotional, and so people mistake that as being, you know, this sort of ultra rationality. I see straight through it. You know, he's not like that at all. He's very attached emotionally to certain very specific ideas, and particularly his leftist politics. And basically, he rationalizes, just like you know, Jonathan Heiss, the elephant and the writer. His elephant is in charge. I mean, big time. You know, I never saw it as as distinctly as in his talk in 2016. He had a talk with Scott Adams during the presidential campaign about sort of like Trump versus Hillary, who's the best. And okay, again, I'm not a super big Scott Adams fan, but he, I thought he made some good points, and then Sam Harris just would not listen at all. I mean, not even close. To him, it was Hillary all the way. He did admit she wasn't perfect, but what he was saying about Trump was just absolutely beyond ridiculous. I mean, it was like the Trump derangement syndrome.
So I'd like to tease out something you said here just a minute so that I can understand what you're thinking. I heard you say two things. One is you talked about Sam Harris's leftism. So I'd like you to explain to me what you mean when you say leftism, because labels are always fudgy.
Well,
hold
I guess
on.
it ties.
The second thing is you said Sam Harris is very emotional. He rationalizes things. So I wondered if you could kind of define for me your difference between rationalizing something and behaving rationally.
Yeah, right. So, okay. Well, let's take the second one first. So rationalizing is basically trying to come up after the fact with more or less rational arguments to support your emotionally arrived at previous conclusion. So you first accept a conclusion based on an emotional reaction to something, let's say poverty on Earth.
I don't think it necessarily always has to be an emotional reaction to something. What you're saying sounds very much like what happens with some science. That they rationalize a result based on a conclusion that they made before they started the research.
Yeah, but that's because they had a reason. They had an emotional reason to do that in the first place. And typically, it doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Almost every scientific endeavor that it starts out with some sort of personal reason for pursuing that particular topic. Everybody has a reason.
That's the point. Now, if you come to if you then pursue rationally, and you end up finding contrary evidence, the rational thing is to then say, okay, I was wrong, and I'm going to start over again. And sometimes it happens.
Yeah.
But when you persist, regardless of the evidence, and basically that's where confirmation bias comes. When you content yourself with trying to find positive evidence in favor of your hypothesis, and then you completely disregard any contrary evidence, that's proof that you're rationalizing as opposed to being rational. It's very different. And so critical rationalism, that's Karl Popper's term. It's being reasonable is first and foremost being critical of your own ideas. And because it's very difficult for people to be critical of their own ideas, that's why the scientific endeavor is different, because it relies on the cross-pollination or cross-criticism between different scientists. So if you yourself have a blind spot, at least in science, what's going to happen is others will try to poke holes in your theory. And then, if you're a rational person, you can admit that you have to maybe start over again. People like Sam Harris don't do that. They are stuck in their worldview, and they will not change their mind. I mean, you can tell he's not open to it. He's not open.
A big financial investment in his worldview.
Yeah, sure. It's all kind of, but what to me, what the key thing is, you can't stop your analysis at just before, at the point where you start encountering difficulties, with your thesis. That's what he does all the time. When he's analyzed the situation and he's found, some favorable evidence, and then that's where he stops and says, okay, I said my work is done. No, your work just started. Now you have to look at all the potential contrary evidence and see, how to either address that, fit it in, modify your theory, come up with, modifications, or if the evidence is too bad, then you have to start over again. And
So this is
And
one of the things I really like about the way you think, is that you understand how big the problems are, and that there are so many potential options and possibilities. And
that's why I like Taleb. That's why I like Nassim Taleb. He's one of my heroes, even though he's a, from a personality wise, he would not be a great example necessarily, but I'm just talking about his ideas. I think he nails it.
One of the reasons I like McGilchrist's book is he has little nuggets in there that get me really thinking. And there's two little nuggets in there that really got me thinking about a lot of things. And one is that when you break apart a metaphor, you lose cognitive content. In the same way that, like, if someone tells a joke and I don't understand the joke and I ask them to explain it to me, they can explain the joke to me, so I can understand why it was funny, but I've completely lost the deeper intent of the joke. I've lost a lot of connections that the joke would have made in me. Metaphor is even more so. When you have to interpret and analyze a metaphor, you lose most of the cognitive content. The capacity of that metaphor to teach very, very deep truths is lost when you have to break it apart. So I think that we not only have all of the options for analytical truth in the universe and all the pieces that put together the universe, but there's also this deep metaphorical truth that is there, that if we only sit on the analytical side, we lose that deep, deep metaphorical truth.
If we only sit on the analytical side, I would say, yes, you're right, but that's not necessarily what we have to do or what we do. And as a matter of fact, I would go farther. What do you think Jordan Peterson's been doing? He's been breaking down metaphors and explaining the underlying meaning. He's been analyzing what they mean in evolutionary terms, right?
But then
does that completely destroy the metaphor? I don't think so. I mean, maybe to some people, as a matter of fact, to some people, it seemed to have helped them understand the metaphor.
Yes,
so it actually increased their meaning.
That's absolutely true. But fortunately, there are some metaphors that can't be broken apart that way.
And I'm not going to necessarily disagree with that. It's possible, but I don't think it's a universal thing that as soon as you start analyzing a metaphor, it automatically completely breaks down.
Oh, I didn't say it.
Possible.
I didn't say it broke down. I said you lose.
Yeah, but you lose meaning. Content. Yeah, you lose meaning. All right, you lose content.
Maybe,
or maybe you gain content.
We've never. I don't think we've ever resolved the issue completely of the difference between information and knowledge and meaning and wisdom. Those things, there are a lot of overlaps in those words. And so just in looking at those four things, there would be miles of depth that we could take a look at that. But certainly when you break apart a metaphor, you lose cognitive content.
Possibly, but you might lose a certain form of cognitive content, but you might gain another form. So I think
I'll give you that.
I think you have to be sort of careful as to, what's better. I think in some cases, the overall might be considered a loss, and in some other cases. But I think also people react differently to that. I'm a more analytical kind of person, so I tend not to see it as losing content when a metaphor is analyzed. I actually like it. But some people understand better with just a pure metaphor. And when I say understand, they can't, it's not implicit knowledge. So they can't really explain it, but they somehow get it, in a sort of a gestalt type of process. So that's why some people prefer to read like great literature, where some of the great philosophical ideas, the great existential questions of humanity are explored through story, through fiction. And some people like me, I tend to be more the person that actually likes books of philosophy, where the same concepts are approached much more explicitly and broken down, But I can fully understand a personality that would like it better the other way. Reading Dostoevsky or Jordan Peterson is great because he's kind of both. He's able to talk to both sides and bridge that gap. So that's I think that's part of what made his appeal so strong, because he's able to talk to both types of personalities very well, and sort of bridge that. Well, I don't know if gap is the right way, but that sort of divide between the type of personality that's more holistic and likes to kind of more feel their way through a problem, as opposed to people like me. Although I've done these tests, right brain, left brain, I'm very even. So I'm perhaps more like Peterson, I'm able to see both sides, but I would fully admit I tend to be more an analytical in nature. So I think, I don't think it's quite as simple, but there's a lot of truth to what you said. I mean, say to some people, particularly, I said to some types of personality, I could see that there would be a loss of cognitive content by the breakdown of the metaphor. I think I would agree with that. I don't think it's just a universal thing, both based on what is the metaphor in the first place, and also what type of personality, what kind of individual you're talking to. I think both of these would make a difference.
So one of the other things that he said in his book that really set a lot of bells and whistles going for me is that cooperation requires difference. And
vive la différence. Well, I think that's why you and I and Ira are, I think, in favor of like free market approach, or like more freedom approaches to problem resolution, as opposed to top down, imposed government, utopian, holistic. Everybody should think the same way. We tend to be more favorable to a world where people can have their differences, and what's important is that they're able to live in peace with each other. And so to the extent that everybody can either resolve their differences or just follow their differences, each their own way, as long as they don't harm anybody else, sort of a libertarian kind of a view where well, if if you want to do something and your neighbor wants to do something else, we can both do what we want, as long as we don't harm the other person, right? Either willingly or unwillingly. So
what you're describing there is you're describing the difference between the impact of a totalizing system,
right,
and the impact of a system that's based on cooperative differences.
Right.
So if you look strictly at the totalizing system, the top-down approach, that kind of a system is created purely from analytical thinking.
Well, yeah, correct, but it's incorrect analytical thinking, right? So
yeah, okay.
So these are people that do not push. To me, it's rationalizing analytical thinking. In other words, this kind of thinking tends to be from people who are emotionally disturbed by something in the world. Let's call it poverty or inequality or what, you name it. And then based on this emotional reaction, they will try to come up with a rational system which will somehow solve that problem, right? And
that may be part of it, but I also think there's another part of it, which is often that way of thinking is termed progressivism. And it's looking at this continuous progress, this continuous incremental progress. And when analytical thinking gets trapped in that incremental progress loop or trap, where everything is modular and linear and just keeps building a taller and taller tower, that's where science goes off the rails, because the real innovations in science have not come from incremental progress, but have come from brilliant flashes of intuitive insight.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the big things like general, relativity, even the Newtonian. Yeah, but that's, that goes back to the paradigm shifts, Thomas Kuhn. I'm not a big
But
fan of Kuhn.
where did those come from? Those are not purely rational.
No, you cannot. Well, if you read Karl Popper, this is nothing new. You cannot deduce novelty from the past. You cannot logically deduce it.
When I say things, I'm not saying it because I think it's something new. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to help us develop a way of thinking together.
Right. Okay. All right. So yeah, I say it's a well-known fact, the logical fact that you cannot deduce future novelty from past knowledge. So it's impossible. So yeah, it like Einstein said. He said, the way he thought these novel discoveries or novel theories, these hypotheses about the world came from a deep love of the objects at hand. So he had a deep love for the physical objects that he was studying, and I think so. There is emotion. There is emotion in it.
Well, and I don't think we have to put, maybe emotion is not a big enough word for that. I think it goes to what N.T. Wright and Esther Meek and Brent Lonergan talk about when they're talking about relational knowing, that the really deep knowing is the kind of knowing that you have when you come into relationship with the object. So Einstein has this deep love of the object, and so he's developing a relationship of knowing, getting to know, letting that knowledge integrate into him, and in such a way that these flashes of insight come. And I don't see how it can be any other way.
Well, I guess he was trying to solve some issues that were unresolvable by any other means. So there is part of that thing. I think it was Arthur Conan Doyle, and Sherlock Holmes said, once you've eliminated all the potential possibilities, the one that remains, even though implausible, must be the one that's true, right? So there's part of that there. So once you've eliminated,
I want you to concentrate on that, because that is like a deep, deep truth right there.
Yeah, well, I like those.
Yeah, because that's the one thing that you say that, but you don't really believe it.
No, I do. That's the way I operate all the time. As a matter of fact, it's kind of an issue sometimes, because of this. It takes me a long time to try to eliminate all the possibilities. I'm so analytical. I'm always in doubt that I finish my analysis, right? Now, there are some things that, and I was great, I think was your guest, was it Neil? That he was talking about suicide statements the other day. Mm-hmm. And there are some truths that are completely undeniable and are apodictically, they say, they're true. So this is a very special category of truths that have to do with self-reference. Just like, Gödel showed that there are true propositions in any system that's as complex as at least the system of, I think was it natural numbers or whatever, but in mathematics, that are known to be true, but yet they are unprovable in the system. Same thing, there are some things that it's not provable, but we know they have to be true. And I think your guest, I think it was Neil, right? He gave a couple of examples of that. That truth was a transcendent property, let's say, or that there are things like I think Professor Vervaeke called them pragmatic contradictions. I call them performative contradictions. So that people, when they are denying a certain fact, they are actually performing this as they are denying it. And for example, I'll give you an example. So some people say, well, truth is, there is no such thing as truth. And I think it's close to what the example that Neil gave says. There is no such thing as an absolute truth. So I say, well, is what you're saying not an absolute truth, or is it? If it's relative, I don't care. I'll take my own truth. And so why are you even making that statement? And if you're meaning it as a universal truth, then you just disprove yourself. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a suicide statement is what he called it. I called it a performative contradiction. I think Vervaeke called it a pragmatic contradiction. Mm-hmm. But there are a few things, but that's a relatively narrow category of facts about the universe that you can put that in. Although I must say, Ludwig von Mises, wrote a 1,000-page tome called Human Action based on just that. It's a treatise on economics, based on the fact that human must act, which is an undeniable fact, because the fact of denying it would be an act in and of itself. So you're contradicting yourself. You say, well, no, human must, don't have to act. But what you just acted in making that statement. And then from that, he derives, the fact that acting automatically implies the category of choice. Acting only means choosing one way of doing things versus another way. And by the way, he's got this interesting argument, Ludwig von Mises, that is, of why that proves that God as an agent is not a viable concept, and it's not a logically consistent concept, because God doesn't have to choose between various ends and means. He's omnipotent, so by definition, he doesn't have to act. I'll say the category of action entails the preference of one end state compared to a possible different end state, and we have to choose one over the other. But God never has to do that. I mean, if he does, then it would have to be explained why that is. Because an omnipotent God could, basically. Well, another way to put it is, we as human, we want to substitute an imperfect state of affair for a more perfect state of affair. So we choose an incremental, perfectionism. So we don't like state of affair A, so we're going to try to work to make it a little bit better by doing something. From God's perspective, the universe is already perfect, so there is nothing he can do to make it better. It's perfection's perfection. You don't mess around with it. So it's very different.
Why would it be necessary to see God as an agent? I don't.
Well, that's the God 1 and God 2 of Paul. I mean, Paul van der Klee. God 1, which is maybe the God of Spinoza. The God, the immutable, sort of the God of nature that represents the laws, the immutable laws of nature. What I call the natural law is one thing, but then God as agent, somebody who actually intervenes actively in people's lives. Answers their prayers or performs miracles in the world on occasion. That's the agent God, right? I mean, you can discuss that if you disagree. That's my view of my interpretation of God 1 and God 2 in the Paul van der Klee terminology. And I think it's a useful terminology because it is the distinction between, say this maybe a creator God, that created the universe at the Big Bang and then just lets it run. And he's the origin of all the laws of physics and whatnot. But then after its launch, it kind of goes on its own and does not require any more divine intervention. If it does require divine intervention, that means it wasn't perfect in the first place, which then brings up a whole bunch of theological questions. So, but anyway, that kind of gets us off the topic. I just thought it was an interesting argument that Ludwig von Mises had. The initial topic was that there are some undeniable truths about
that might be an interesting thread to take God as an agent for a future conversation.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, To me, I'd say I think everybody knows my position on this now.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah,
say God one makes sense. I do believe in natural law, which is a very very important normative concept. By the way, I think part of the reason that we have a meaning crisis is the loss of belief in the fact that we humans are limited by the fact that we have to obey these laws. I mean, when I say obey, when we talk about the descriptive natural law, it's like we don't obey voluntarily, like the law of gravity, right? So we obey it as physical bodies. We don't have a choice. When it comes to the normative natural law, that's a different story. That's what makes us human separate and distinct from the purely physical world, is that we do have a choice. And that gets us into the free will discussion, I thought maybe we would talk about today and whatnot. But, we humans, unlike stones that fall or apples that fall from the tree, we do have some choices to make, right? But the fact that those choices will have very specific consequences, that's a fact, and we can't avoid that. Now, a lot of people think that they can avoid those consequences by manipulating and creating this utopian world in which nobody will ever suffer a negative consequence from any of their actions. And that's the root of what you can call it progressivism or leftism, but it is this belief that no matter what people's decisions are, they can be made whole ex post facto. So after the fact, you can make the stupidest decision in your life. And when I say we have to define what we is, but typically it's like the government will make you whole, regardless. You can be as stupid as you want. You can make any decision. In fact, there is no such thing as stupidity in that world, because your decisions will always lead to the same end results, because we want equality. So anytime a decision creates an inequality anywhere, let's say that my decision to save versus spend all my money today because I have to live my life as if today was my last day on earth, versus saving for the future, that makes no difference, because if I save, the government will take it away from me to pay for the people that didn't save, right? So there's no difference in the end. We have equality of outcomes. So that removes any need for morality. There's no need for moral rules. There's no need for ethics. There's no need for meaning at all anymore. And that's to me that is the real root of the meaning crisis. So some people see it the other way around. That the meaning crisis is what has created let me a second. Please don't do that. Kids knocking on the door. Anyway, sorry.
Well,
but
but what you just said created a picture for me that I want to express to you, because I think it was very helpful in helping this picture come to me. That what's happening with leftism and progressivism is this continual breaking apart, because people want to go their own way and they want someone to fix it for them, but they don't want to have to turn around and go back and get on the correct path, right?
Well, they don't have to in those conditions. If you're going to be made whole every time, you don't have to go back and reassess your actions. So it goes back to the Sam Harris free will thing. Yeah.
Karl, let me just finish the thought, though. I need to spin out the whole thought.
Right.
So you're going down the trail and you take a wrong turn and you get off in this place where everything is a mess, and you want that to be protected for you, so the government or somebody jumps in and takes care of everything for you. And so you can keep going on your own way, and then it breaks apart more and more, like a fractal, like a tree with many, many branches, only everybody's getting way out. And I think that's exactly how we got to this place today with intersectionalism and with identitarianism And for one thing, everybody wants to be different, but it's this peer pressure kind of different that really makes everyone the same. So I'm going to be different and unique, and I'm going to be a third gender or 42nd gender or something. But what I'm really saying is I want to be like all these other people that are the 42nd gender. So it's this constant breaking apart rather than turning around and going back to where the truth was in the first place. And so I think this is where the reason I bring this up is you said something about wanting the government to come in and fix all our problems because our actions have consequences. So there are two lines of truth there. The one is the person who says, I made a mistake, but now I want the government to fix it for me so I can keep going my own way. The Christian says, I made a mistake. I really screwed up my life. How can I ever have a different life again? The consequences are over. My life is over. It's hopeless. No, the Christian says, I'm going to turn around, which is the word repent. I'm going to turn around and go back the way I came until I get to the trunk of the tree, the source of life. And when I do that, God, whether we call him an agent or not, is fully capable of bringing something beautiful out of that. Not that he fixes it in the same way that the government fixes it, because it may look entirely different to us than what we would have wanted it to look like. But what it does end up looking like is something beautiful and powerful. And one of the pictures that Jordan Peterson uses that I really like is this idea that when you have a pristine relationship with the truth that is spoken brings into being the ultimate good. So when we act in truth, when we come into union with truth, then what he brings into being in our lives is beautiful and good. And so it's a difference between, yes, both are in a place of loss and suffering and difficulty. One person looks to government to fix it. The other person looks to God to fix it. But I think it's a fundamentally different approach, because the one who looks to God to fix it is acting in gratitude and humility.
Right.
The one who looks to government to fix it is acting in pride and rebellion.
I was going to say exactly that. That's a huge difference right there. Because, in the one case, you would hope that perhaps then the person learned from their mistake. And I know one of the issues is sometimes it is true that pursuing truth will bring goodness and beauty, but the problem is the time scales involved sometimes are very long, right? So, and most people don't have that kind of time horizon. I mean, I'm talking very long, like more than one life, more than one generation. That's why, I read the Bible along when I was younger. It didn't make any sense to me that, it said, okay, well, God punished future generations for the deeds of their fathers, or, for the current generation. And it's the future generation that pay the price. Now, from a God agent, it's a point of view, they say, well, it's really unfair, right? I mean, the people that did the crime should be the ones that pay. But in real life, from a God one perspective, that's the way it often works, right? So the sins of the fathers are visited upon the future generations, and that's very true. That's just reality. But so that's why Jordan Peterson stresses the fact, his concept of God as maybe a metaphor or a symbol for the good, but over like time scales that are unthinkable to us in our limited way, is very, very I think it's on point. I think, and that's a problem. Most people, it's hard for people to think of the future like this in a way that that they can relate to. I mean, to me, it's pretty easy. I mean, I got my children, and I think they're all gonna have children someday, and it's like I was commenting today on Paul's recent video about he's starting this videos about the TV show The Good Place.
I listened to that while we were walking the dog this morning.
Said, well, yeah, our actions echo into eternity in ways that we don't understand. I mean, it's complex system theory. So, who knows? The one movie that addresses sort of that is Cloud Atlas. It's really about how the actions, in one era have future consequences, like hundreds of years later or thousands of years later, that are completely unforeseeable, but nevertheless, that one action, 1,000 years back, ends up having an effect in the distant future. And so, yeah, we never know, so it's very hard for us as limited human beings with limited cognition to be able to relate to that. But I think the idea of God kind of encapsulates that notion in a very powerful way. But again, to me, it's this necessarily non-agent God. It's just like this. It's nature writ large and the laws of the universe writ large.
Well, so there's two ends.
That's sufficient for me.
Ends of every pole, though. So the one pole, the pole of eternity, goes into the future on the human scale, but there's also an eternity that goes into.
Yeah, but that's something I can't. To me, that's something I can't address. It's beyond my capacity.
Well,
I can't deal with it.
Yeah.
I can't. My thing is try to make the world better the best I can. And people say, well, how do you know if you make the world better? Well, you don't really know. The thing is, all you can do is act in a way that has been shown by past generations to kind of favor the better. And then people say, well, nobody can define better or worse. It's like, of course you can. Having food is better than starving. Being alive is better than being dead. Not suffering is better than not suffering. Not having disease is better than having a disease. It's silly to say that you can't define what's good.
Sure. And Jordan Peterson says you can't act at all if you don't have some sense of value of one
right, of course,
than another.
Ludwig von Mises says that too. Obviously, action implies value. Mm-hmm. Automatically, it implies hierarchy of value. That you value something more than something else, because you always have a choice in picking your ends. Do I want to achieve this end versus that end? And I have to choose. I have no, there is no choice. I have to choose. I can't do everything at the same time. I'm not God, so I can't do all. I have limited means. I have limited time, for one thing. All right, so I can't do it. Even if I had multi-billionaire like Jeff Bezos, he's still limited. Because he only has one life, right? So he still has to pick and choose what he's going to do with his $100 billion. And so he still has to act. It's easier for him. He has more options, but he's still faced with options. He still can't do everything that he might want to do in his life. So that's a universal part of the human condition.
There's this very mysterious thing about value, though, and we're probably going to have to end on this because I can hear that your kids are.
Yeah, I know. And this is just starting to be too much. Maybe we have to redo this. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how this is going to come out, but maybe we have to reschedule some other time. And
let's talk about the mysteries of value the next time, because I think there's a lot in there about the whole von Mises perspective on value that goes to this issue of eternal truth as well. So,
yeah, they're very intimately related.
Yeah,
I completely agree with you. I think you and I are a lot closer than might first appear on a lot of things.
That's why I say we're two sides of the same sheet of paper.
Yeah. No, but that's why I like being on your channel. And I think some of it is making sure that we have our definitions correct. But I think we're not that far apart in a lot of things. But I would like to talk later about I thought we were going to talk about it today, but about the free will issue. Yes. And expound on what I talked about during the Vander Clay talk, because there were a lot of comments in the comment section. Some of them were very good. Some of them were not very good. And they basically misunderstood the point I was trying to make. So if I can take the opportunity of using your channel to make it clearer.
Oh, absolutely.
Because, but I would like, there was one commenter sent me some links, and I think I sent you the actual paper that, one of those was a link to a paper that addressed pretty much exactly what I was talking about on the Paul van der Klee video. So about the impossibility of prediction within the system in self-referential systems. So that was very interesting.
Okay, I'm going to see if I can find it. I've been inundated with.
I can send you I sent you an attachment. It's a PDF file, if I remember well.
Okay. Okay.
But or I can send you the link, also to the PDF file. I mean, there's no cost. It's available online.
Yeah. Okay.
It's pretty good. It's not a huge, and it's not like super long either. So it,
as you can see, I've been putting out a lot of content lately, so I've been inundated with material. So I'm getting a little behind on my email. Well, this has been great, Karl, and I'm going to say this to everybody who's watching, that if you're watching and you like this, be sure to click the link and subscribe, because we want more people to get to hear all of Karl's great ideas and to contemplate these things that we're talking about, because we are outsourcing the problem and we're going to find a solution.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Karl.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll talk again soon.
My best to your family. Bye-bye.
Right. Thank you.